Star Force was originally an arcade shoot-'em-up that was later ported over to the 8-bit Nintendo console. For bootleg enthusiasts, Star Force is often a favorite to include on many multi-cart things out there in the wild, and it was on one of those multi-carts that I would be first exposed to Star Force. However, eventually I got my own copy of Star Force for the NES, which saw quite a few changes from the original Famicom release, but I'm kinda jumping ahead here. Like most space shooters, Star Force puts you in control of a little spaceship where you're charged with the mission of, well, killing anything that moves and trying to avoid colliding with enemy ships and projectiles. You can also destroy bits of scenery, which will sometimes reveal panels that you could destroy for bonus points. You'll sometimes come across a power-up that will enhance the speed of your shots for rapid-fire action, and that's about it. That's all the enhancement you're getting. Maybe a bomb that you could shoot lots of times to clear out the screen of enemies, or an occasional panel that nets you an extra life, but other than that, it's just you and your wits against the forces of evil. After causing a bunch of damage, you'll eventually confront the boss of the current sector, usually a glowy thing that will slowly descend upon you. As such, you only have a limited amount of time to kill the boss, or else it'll escape and you'll have to do the whole stage all over again. But if you destroy the boss, you'll get a bonus tally and move on to the next sector, which merely changes the colors and graphics and some enemies as well. To put it simply, Star Force is a fairly basic space shooter, adopting that classic formula of a lone ship against legions of enemy forces, with only a pea shooter and the pilot's quick reflexes as its only allies. Beyond the scrolling scenery, there is little in terms of innovation or creativity on display here. What's being played here is fairly old hat, and for what it does fairly well. Control is simple to understand, the D-pad moves, the buttons shoot. Your ship moves about rather quickly, but never to a point of being detrimental to the overall game. There's not a whole lot to Star Force really. It's a game you could pick up and play and try to conquer. It is perhaps the perfect vanilla shooter, the kind that could be enjoyed if one comes in with low expectations. For those looking for a little more substance, such as a Gradius or a B-Wings or whatever, look elsewhere. All you're getting here is wave after wave of super speedy fighters unleashing a barrage of projectiles at you while you're stuck with a rinky-dink pea shooter that you could only slightly upgrade its firing rate. Makes for a good challenge, I suppose. And if you manage to clear all 24 waves, then congratulations, you're the king of the Star Force, have a trophy, t-shirts in the mail, nobody's going to care. I said nobody's going to care. When Star Force was initially released in 1985 for the family computer, the game attempted to faithfully adapt the visuals and audio of the arcade original and did a fairly decent job of it. Fast forward to 1987, where Star Force made its way over to North American audiences and the Nintendo Entertainment System, and there were a number of changes made to the product in terms of the visuals and audio. Mostly the audio, as the graphics in this version of Star Force are more or less the same, but there's a couple added bits like your ship getting an overhaul once you pick up a power-up. With that having been said, Star Force graphics are crisp, clean, and simple, while lacking in finer details that would eventually be gained in later NES games in general. It's enough for you to know what everything is, or at least supposed to be. Star Force on a family computer has audio that more or less stays true to the original arcade game. Star Force on the NES keeps the same tunes, but enhances them somewhat with different instrumentation and added drums. Your mileage may vary as to which is preferable, but I kinda like the added drum beats. It adds a bit of substance to an otherwise forgettable tune. It sounds a bit deeper at least. Sound effects are your usual pew pew, boom boom, 8-bit sound effects. The usual stuff, I guess. Star Force is a fairly rudimentary, fairly basic vertical scrolling space shooter that really isn't all that special. There isn't anything here that hasn't been done on a dozen other similar shoot-'em-ups. But for what it does, it's a pretty solid game that plays well, it's easy to get into, and can get pretty intense after a while. It's a game you'll pull out every once in a while, give it a whirl for a bit, have something of a good time with it before moving on to something else. It's fairly cheap, somewhat easy to come across, so if you're into like basic space shooters, give it a whirl. You might have a good time with it. I said nobody's going to care.